I know that I'm in deep with a new fandom when I start buying the supplemental material. You know, merch, side stories, that kind of stuff. It's kinda hard with XCOM because the only substantive XCOM content I can buy are 2K's painfully paltry collection, or I can buy the books. Or I could go back to the 90s games, but I'm not really interested in doing that quite yet. Anyway, out of the XCOM books, there was a brief moment after the release of War of the Chosen that Fireaxis was interested in telling backstories for the 3 hero resistance factions. They only ended up publishing the first, and it apparently tanked so hard they immediately gave up on the rest. So, what happened? XCOM Factions was released in 2018, written by Kevin J. Anderson and illustrated by Michael Panic. The comic follows Elena Dragonova, known to players as our Tutorial Reaper, and the creation of the Chosen Hunter, taking place in the in-universe year of 2030. This comic also touches on the start of Praetal Mox's defection, how he was broken out of Advent's psionic network, and what he did while he was one of their captains. In exploring what this comic did right or wrong, I first have to establish that writing peripheral content for an existing video game series is a bit of a trap. If you've ever been in the Five Nights at Freddy's or World of Warcraft fandoms, you know exactly what I mean. Both of those franchises have this nightmare habit of putting essential context in their books instead of in the games people actually play. Everyone who experienced the jarring shock of Cataclysm's world overhaul or asked, "Who the fuck is Afton?" at the start of Sister Location can tell you. Forcing your audience to jump mediums is an imposition on their time and investment that you do not want to make. There's a simple reason for this. Not all of your fans are going to be obsessed enough to buy everything with the series' title in it. If they miss something, they're going to be pissed. And given what an all-encompassing media video games are, there's no excuse for leaving out key facts and details. Not everyone's refreshing the developer's Twitter pages every 3 seconds for every possible announcement. Believe it or not, gamers have lives. That begs the question, what even counts as vital lore for a franchise? Well, in the examples above, Warcraft's vital lore would include events such as the assassination of Karen Bloodhoof, the replacement of Thrall with Garrosh as Horde War Chief, and the founding of the Dwarven Council. Those events didn't take place in WoW proper. They instead took place in The Shattering by Christy Golden. For FNAF, vital lore means the identity of the fucking killer, the existence of the Emily family, and their relationship to William Afton. These things should have never been written into a book before being established in the games proper. Factions actually dodges this problem rather well. The backstories of Elena, Mox, and the Chosen Hunter aren't vital lore, because that information doesn't complete the game's story, it just adds some detail. XCOM takes such a broad scope to its plot that you can afford to put these things in a book instead of in the game. In fact, Factions dodges the problem a little too well. They dodged a melee strike from a standard Muton and smacked their face into a Berserker's beefy tits. Because here's the thing, it turns out the Chosen Hunter was originally Elena's boyfriend, Tomko. Mox captured him for the Elders, who then tortured and transformed him into the Chosen Hunter, leading to the failure of the earliest attempts at alliance between the remnants of XCOM, the Reapers, and the Skirmishers. On paper, that's a hell of a lot of meat to cook with. Elena's grief over Tomko, Tomko's struggle to resist the Elder's corruption, the contextualization of Elena's fury towards Mox, and the guilt that will bite him in the ass when he switches sides. That all sounds like the start of a good story, doesn't it? Unfortunately, none of this goes where you'd expect it to. So let's see where it all fell apart. We start with the shootout in which Tomko's captured. We don't get a lot of time to know him or about his relationship with Elena. We get a sense of their dynamic. Tomko is just as sassy and clever as he is in-game as the Hunter, even as a human, and it translates to a playful flirtiness with Elena that helps balance out her otherwise very serious personality. The reader can get the idea that they keep each other in check. Elena is obviously the stronger fighter, but Tomko, despite regularly needing rescue, makes a point of helping her relax and wind down after the battle's over. At least under normal circumstances. Given that Tomko's capture has been completed by page 15, we're just kinda left to take the narrative's word that they were totally great together, super in love, definitely coulda, I don't know, get babies and have married or whatever. Which would be one thing if the reader was the only one left uninvested in Tomko. In theory, the broader metatextual narrative can still work with the lack of development, at least a little. Elena is the protagonist here, and her emotions can still carry the story. Her relationship with Tomko doesn't matter as much as how she reacts to his loss, how it changes her and how it hurts her. The consequences are what matter to us because we already care about her. Yeah, Elena moves on by page 19. Literally 2 page flips later, the Reapers after the battle get attacked by Lost, and this random Uggo out of the Reapers' ranks shoots some zombies to help her out, and she immediately jumps on that dick. It's not even just fast in terms of the reader's experience. The Reapers are eating the Berserkers they killed during the battle. Elena moved on from Tomko within the same evening he was taken captive. Tomko hasn't even been turned into the Hunter yet! So, yeah, even if you're the type of reader to take these crumbs and roll right into the headcanon express, it's kinda hard to jump on board when the surviving half of this tragic couple gets over it that quickly. To be fair, it's not exactly out of character for her. It took her 30 seconds in-game to go from hating Mox's guts to smacking his hot hybrid ass. I won't disagree that it could be clumsy writing, but honestly, I let it slide. To me, severe emotional repression / whiplash is just a feature of her personality. But even with that point of view, that doesn't change the fact that this leads to an underlying narrative problem. The comic may as well have not bothered with this reveal at all. If Tomko's presence in Elena's life is so unimportant as to be near instantly forgotten, then what does it matter who he used to be? He could have been a complete nobody for all that it matters. While Elena does flip out later when she meets the Hunter and still recognizes him, that goes nowhere because the comic ends at the end of the next page. The game itself doesn't help. XCOM 2 is structured such that key narrative details in your playthrough get randomized if you choose to play without tutorials. Elena isn't in the game if you don't do the Lost and Abandoned. But the Hunter is a core feature of War of the Chosen, so his presence has to stand on its own, divorced from his personal context. That means there's no space to establish or even hint at who he was prior to what the Elders did to him. At best, you can squint at some of his dialogue during your map scans and assume that at least some of it might relate to how he feels as a former Reaper. This separation from any past with the Reapers gets solidified in the comic once Tomko succumbs to his brainwashing. He's written out of his own memories. His emotional investment in the Reapers, including towards Elena, ceased to exist. By the time he goes on his first hunt, he's the sadistic egotist we know and love, without any of the added depth that the premise of his backstory promises. So, anything involving the Hunter is a complete bust. What about Mox? Technically in the comic, Elena never actually hears Mox's name or finds out about his specific involvement with the strike that led to Tomko's capture. But given that the comic takes place 5 years before she meets Mox face to face, it does feel against the established expertise of the Reapers that she wouldn't have found out by then that Mox is the reason she's single now. The other guy dies in the battle with the Hunter, I think. It's really hard to tell the randos apart, but I've played the Lost and Abandoned something like 500 times by now, and nothing in Elena's dialogue implies a personal experience with Mox's alleged brutality as an Advent captain. The reason she cites for distrusting him is based on his apparent success in wiping out entire camps worth of Reapers at the start of the war, meaning well before the events with Tomko. Even more tellingly, when the assassin unwittingly wing-womans the two of them, the way Elena explains the Reaper's experiences with the Chosen, without even defining whether she's talking about the Hunter or the Warlock in doing so, she explains it as if she thinks Mox would have no idea where the specific Chosen hunting her people would have come from. Okay, fine. Factions was written later, and if running the dialogue under a microscope reveals some cracks in the final narrative, it's not a big deal. There's much bigger discrepancies in the canon than that, and again, this isn't exactly important, given the wide-angle view we have being who we are in the context of the narrative. The commander of XCOM doesn't need to be personally privy to the relationships of their soldiers. Wait, that's literally a gameplay feature. But that does mean that Factions has nothing to offer on its own merits. The comic introduces what could have been a juicy 3-course drama and drops the ball on every bite. Not exactly worthy of a Reaper's feast, is it? So, the story's fallen flat on its face. Is there anything else salvageable about the comic, say, from an adaptational standpoint? After all, even if it's kneecapped itself on the field, it could at least be entertaining to read. Well, I'll say this for Factions. It's not shy about embracing video game imagery. Certain panels feel taken straight from a screenshot. It's also very clever about handling the Advent language. Whenever Mox is speaking, but the POV isn't on his side, the comic uses a font that distorts the words in his dialogue, akin to the alien font in-game, while keeping it recognizable as the Latin alphabet. So you know what he's saying, but you still get the impression that he's not actually speaking English. That's kinda all the praise I can give the comic on this front. XCOM is a tactics game. The player knows exactly who they have on the mission, what they can do, roughly how many enemies to expect, and what kind of enemies to expect. Obviously, on the ground and in-universe, an individual soldier won't have this information. They're stuck with a chaotic, confusing, bloody mess with only their trust in their leadership and their own abilities to guide them. But that doesn't mean the comic couldn't have still worked with the genre of gameplay from the source material and allowed the reader to know more wholly what was happening. As it is, every action taken by the characters is shunted into the background with little comprehension of exactly what's going on beyond, ah shit, we're losing now because the plot needs us to lose. More importantly, the actual abilities of each unit are poorly demonstrated. Each shootout is a brainless jumble, on par with the type of 80s cartoon fight scene, where each side shoots at each other without ever interacting, and any unique features a specific character has are never explored or brought up, even when it'd be useful. Reapers are mid-range snipers with a penchant for explosives. None of those trucks should be intact, not a single claymore gets thrown out, and most importantly, these dumbasses are fighting in the open. If this were how you were fielding a squad of Reapers in-game, that mission would end in a squad wipe. Especially if you were up against hefty damage sponges like Andromedons and Berserkers. Not that it matters what the Andromedons or Berserkers are capable in this comic either. Andromedons in games are two-phase mooks, but looking at them in the comic, they seem to just die once. No demonstration of the suits getting back up after the pilot implodes in our atmosphere. Again, in-game, clustering your troops on a rooftop against a pod of Andromedons would realistically result in the world's deadliest pool party. Here, they're just firing their normal guns like they don't have acid launchers strapped to their backs. This would all be reasonable if the comic at least took advantage of what these creatures are theoretically capable of, as in using the source material as a jumping off point to extrapolate what the aliens or the Reapers could do in-universe but not in-game. But with how they're utilized, Mox may as well have just pulled more Advent troops out of his ass. Like, if you're gonna throw in an entire platoon of Berserkers and not one of these beautiful babes tries to, say, throw a car, beat a Reaper into a bloody pulp, break Tomko's lucky ass a little more to make sure he can't fight back as they carry him away, why'd you even bother when there are still Andromedons lumbering about? Even if you want to analyze the comic from an artistic standpoint, it's competent without being particularly special. Colorist Juanma Aguilera does a decent job of taking advantage of the comic's blue-orange color palette to guide the reader's focus. Michael Pennick's art style suits the realism of XCOM 2, as well as adding some grit to match with the edginess of the Reapers as a faction. Except for the whole thing with the Advent language, the comic doesn't really take advantage of itself as a medium to express its story or the emotions of the characters. The panel layout is extremely standard fare, only really dipping into, say, parallelism on pages 4 and 5 to contrast one of the speaker's speeches with the reality outside the city centers, and later on in pages 31 and 33 as Tomko becomes the hunter. I hate to say it, but it's not especially creative. I'm not surprised we didn't get our Skirmisher or Templar comics as Fireaxis may have hoped. Factions isn't bad exactly, but if I didn't already care about Mox and Elena and appreciate every opportunity to admire my gorgeous alien wives, I don't think I'd have bothered with it. The waste of potential is deeply, deeply unfortunate. It's a bit of a shame we didn't get to see the follow-through of Mox's defection, nor meet any fully alien rebels among the Resistance, but that's about all that's lost if this is how the comics were going to go. But I guess that's just how it is sometimes. Fandom's not always receptive to the creators trying something new. That said, I hope Fireaxis hasn't given up entirely on adding more supplemental material to XCOM's universe. There's a great many more stories that can be told in this setting, stories that can't be told in the mainline games, and I'd still like to see them told. But until that day comes, I'm Commander J on Channel 3, and thanks for playing.
37. My girlfriend sucked 37 dicks.
In a row?